Hi, this is Frank Schaefer. I'm standing in a small military graveyard that's part of an old Puritan graveyard in New England. Actually, it's a place where my son might have been buried if he had died in Afghanistan and Iraq in his 3 deployments as a Marine in 2003 and 2004, fighting for our country. He actually told me before he left that if he was killed in combat, he would choose to be buried in Arlington. Remembering that is tough. I went to a military funeral here in this town for a young Army Ranger who John knew in high school and stood for 3.5 hours in line to pay my respects to his parents. And his father knelt next to the coffin where he had collapsed earlier in the service. And that phrase there, "But for the grace of God go I," rung so clearly in my mind. Another thing that was very clear in my mind was the mixed emotion of knowing that at the time George W. Bush was a president I disagreed with. I didn't believe in the wars he was sending my son to. But sometimes we don't have choices about things in life. It's not that easy. Just because I disagree with the government doesn't mean I don't pay my taxes or obey the laws. Just because I fight with my wife, and sometimes the way we love each other best is by leaving the house for a while to let things cool down, doesn't mean that we don't make our marriage work. That's the life we have. We live in a very imperfect country. You know, my wife could be like her mother could have been, a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, a group with a racist background. But her mom, Betty King, as her name was, who then married Betty Walsh after marriage, refused to be part of that organization because even back in the 50s and 60s, she knew better than to want to be part of something that excluded black people. Our country was founded in part by folks like Rufus King, Jeannie's direct ancestor on her mom's side, who was a signatory to the Declaration, the Constitution. And on my side of the family, we had someone on my mom's side, Merritt, who was part of the second voyage of the Mayflower. Far from that making me think this is a great country and that Donald Trump is somehow an aberration. Actually, I know a little about American history. Donald Trump is par for the course. Remember that Thomas Jefferson was not only a slaveholder who did not even free his own slaves, even his own children, who were slave children, but raped a 14-year-old little girl and then made her his mistress, took her to Paris. And you know, there's no excuse saying, oh well, those were the times he lived in and we all have our blind spots. John Adams, who lived near here, and Abigail Adams knew perfectly well that slavery was an abomination, that from the beginning we have had two Americas. An America of ideals, mostly for white people, privileged people like me, and a second America for blacks, for newly arrived immigrants, for Jews when they were first persecuted when they got here, for Irish who took their lumps, but especially for black men and women and children who have never, never, never enjoyed the privileges of genuine full citizenship in this country. Recently we had another illustration of that with the 8-year lynching of Barack Obama by a white oligarchical group of bigots in Congress who now have what they paid for, as it were, in Donald Trump, the logical conclusion to their lies. In fact, he's one of the arch bigot liars. He was a birther and now he's lying about having his phones tapped. He lies about everything. He's a pathological liar. And one reason he's been accepted, even though he is a liar and an egomaniacal fool, is because there are so many white people in this country who still think that somebody like Thomas Jefferson was fine having a slave and raping one of his slave children. So let's make no mistake. The honor of those who serve our country and who are buried in places like this is not because America is perfect. It's because there is a struggle at the heart of this country for justice. And I'm not such a cynic to not believe that didn't go on. Read Abigail Adams' letters. Read John Adams. Understand that even amongst the white founders, there were people of conscience and morality who fought for something better, let alone the great black leaders, be they Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or the great jazz greats who stood out, who had to eat in the back of a restaurant that they then played in the front later. And now this fight continues. And Donald Trump represents the nexus of everything that has always been wrong with America, doubled, tripled. The tragedy of Trump is that it's happening now. How disgusting that in 2017 we have a president who is a chip off the Jeffersonian block, a molester of women who brags about grabbing women and assaulting them and has gotten away with it. Someone who can't even run his own life. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little traditional and old-fashioned, having been married now for 50 years. And believe me, I don't judge anybody who's been divorced. But if you can't get it together 3 times like he, and by the way, his sidekick fascist Bannon can't, then there's a question about what you should be put in charge of if you can't get your personal life together. So this philanderer, this liar, this con artist, this failure, this bankrupt bozo who's in charge of our country is all too typical of American history. And the disappointment for someone like me is that I thought I would live to see the day when things were better. But they aren't. The environment is going backwards. He's trashing our environment. He's trashing our families. He wants to increase military spending, kind of ironic for a draft dodger, and I say that as the father of a Marine who was proud of his service even though I disagreed with the war he was in. So fight back, stand up, resist. We will get rid of this person through democratic and nonviolent means, one way or another, because guess what? There are enough Americans, even evangelical white Americans who voted for him, who will say enough at some point to his lies, to his mental problems of ego and all the rest of it. So stand tall, stand proud, join together to take America in a better direction than the Jeffersonian rape of a child and the Trumpian molesting of women and the disrespect of Jews and Hispanics and Muslims. We are better than this. Thank you. My name is Frank Schaefer.